Good morning. The colors will now be posted by our local VFW post 3360 from right here in Defiance.
Get up. Forward, hard. Forward, hard. Left, 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 three, left, 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 three, left, 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 three, left, left, left. Detail, oh. Hello there. Hold your shoulder.
We gather this day to remember, to honor those who have paid the ultimate price and the greatest sacrifice. A word from our own county commissioner and a decorated veteran, Ryan Mack. He writes, a weekend full of thoughts of the brothers who didn't make it back, or the ones who left a big enough piece of themselves on the battlefield that they could not stay with us once they returned. And an excerpt of the poem for the fallen. They shall not grow old as we that are left to grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Would you pray with me? Almighty God, the God of our yesterdays, our todays, and our tomorrows, we give you thanks for our heroes, those that trudge forward into the places that most fear, into the places that angels fear to tread. On this day, we remember those who have paid the ultimate price on the battlefield and at home. Be with those who grieve and mourn as we remember the heroes that have provided for our freedom and the freedom of many around the world. Give us strength, hope, and compassion. We pray this in your most precious name as the world has called out. Amen. We continue with the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star spangled banner yet wave? Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we
Good morning, everyone. Please be seated. There's plenty of thank yous to go out this morning. First of all, to Lori Schultz for that 15-minute prelude. Lori, thank you very much. Lori's been the organist here at St. Paul for over 20 years. She also accompanies the Defiance City Schools as with the piano and the organ and just does a spectacular job. Again, thank you, Lori. The national anthem was presented to us today by Mr. Stephen Wendell. I've known Stephen Wendell since Stephen Wendell was just a little guy. I went to school with his parents, Bill and Cindy, and it's just a real pleasure to have him here. Stephen has been the music director here at St. Paul for 3 years now. He's married to Kristen, and they have just a lovely little daughter named Charlotte. Stephen, thank you very much. Pastor Brobston, who's out of my sight right now, but when we were meeting as a committee by telephone and email a couple months ago, trying to figure out just what we would do today for this ceremony, it was Pastor Brobston that stepped up and said, Mike, why don't we host it at St. Paul? We have all the capability to get this out on Facebook Live and YouTube, and DCTV is also here today, and they will be broadcasting as well, and we're very thankful for all of these groups and all of their assistance for making it happen. At the time we were in a position where we needed to make a decision, it seemed like the proper thing to do to protect everyone involved. So Pastor Brobston, thank you very much. The committee that normally meets at my office and plans out the Memorial Day program consists of Kathy Booth, who's our band director at the Defiance City Schools and does a marvelous job. Of course, Pastor Brobston, who I mentioned earlier, Rick Boer from the VFW, and Debbie Stevens, my assistant at City Hall. And it's Debbie who, throughout this process, has lined up everything that we will have for you this morning, and I believe this will be a ceremony that everyone will remember for a lot of different reasons. But we're just happy that we are able to bring it to you in this form at least. Next we have Sharon Washington here. Sharon is the VFW Auxiliary President, and she will be placing a memorial wreath here on the altar. So Sharon, if you would join us, please. I've known Sharon for a very long time as well. She was a teller at Toledo Trust and what is now Key Bank, and we enjoy having her here. She'll also be accompanied with Thomas Kent from the Vietnam's Veterans Association, Chapter 954, and he will be placing the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wreath here on the altar as well. Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Tom. Next, we have Reagan Plasek. Reagan Plasek will read to us the Gettysburg Address. Reagan Plasek is an Eagle Scout from Boy Scout Troop 75 of St. John's Lutheran Church here in Defiance. Reagan has been active in scouting since the 2nd grade when he joined Cub Scouts. Some of the memorable experiences that Reagan has had through scouting include participating in several different scouting events, such as lock-ins, Klondike derbies, simple camping trips, and working as a staff member of Boy Scout Camp Lakota for 3 consecutive summers. During his time in scouting, Reagan has learned valuable skills, lessons, and leadership qualities. For his final step to become an Eagle Scout, Reagan was required to complete a service project for the community. He chose to install a flagpole along with interior shelving inside the local Jewel Volunteer Fire Department. During this process, Reagan planned and coordinated the work efforts as well as raising funds. Reagan is part of the 2020 graduating class from Tenora High School. His plans for the future include attending Hocking College in Nelsonville, Ohio, to major in natural resource law enforcement. Some of Reagan's role models in life include his parents and close friends, whom he would like to thank for always pushing him to do the best he can do at whatever he may attempt in life. Reagan? If you'd join us here, please. Watch that wire.
The Gettysburg Address was delivered by President Abraham Lincoln on November 9, 1863, on the battlefield near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the prosperation that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that the nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, but in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little know nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did. It is for us living, rather, that we be dedicated here to be unfinished work which they fought here, having thus so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion, that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we may here highly resolve, and that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth.
Thank you, Reagan, and well done. And congratulations on graduating, and good luck down at hockey. A couple more thank yous. Again, just like to thank our local VFW post. When we need assistance with anything, you can count on our VFW to step up for us. Also, the members of the Vietnam's Veterans of America Welcome Home Chapter 954, the Military Order of the Purple Heart, our DAV Chapter 36. Again, thank you to Reagan. Towards the end of our program this morning, we'll hear from two trumpeters from our Defiance High School band, Seth Fruth and Dane Sutton, and I'm anxious for that. And certainly, again, all the staff here at St. Paul for making this possible. I wasn't sure how we would pull all this off, but they've done it with aplomb, and we are very, very grateful. A couple years ago, I attended an event, I believe it was out at the Hospice Center on North 66. And there to read the flag poem was Brenda Griffith. I've known Brenda for a very, very, very long time. She is a local person. She served on our city council, passionately served on our city council, which I very much admire. She's been very active in scouting. She is a member, a life member of the VFW and also the AMVETS. But what I didn't know was Brenda wrote this poem. And after that event at the Hospice Center, I said to myself, sometime we need to have Brenda read the poem at our Memorial Day program. And because it just seems like it's really, really, you listen to an audio book, and many, many times they're read by the author. And I just wasn't sure, because this is a beautiful poem, how much the community realized that Brenda was the author. So Brenda, if you would please join us here at the podium and read your poem, The Flag.
Thank you, Mayor Mike. This truly is a great day every time we are able to celebrate our Memorial Day. And this is a great alternative to the usual parade that we're able to take to our Riverside Cemetery, but this is just as fantastic as if we had been in the parade. This is the flag. I am the flag of freedom. I am the flag of blood, sweat, and tears. I fly over the Capitol, your school. I have led our troops into battle. I fly on battleships. I am on your planes. I wave breezily in the beginning of parades. I have seen much to protect you, your ideals, your country. Your respect for me has waned. You no longer stand when I enter a room, lead the parades. I have not changed. Why have you? The proud fathers of our past died for me and you. I cover the graves of the fallen. I have been tattered with shells and bullets. I have been covered with the blood of your country, the Pledge of Allegiance and freedom. Long let freedom ring as I pass by. As I wave to you in the wind, won't you wave back? Won't you again honor me as have the peoples of past? I am the flag of freedom. Thank you.
Thank you again, Stephen and Lori. When I took office in January of 2016, the law director at the City of Defiance was David Williams. And David Williams had made it quite clear to me that he would not serve for the first 4 years as mayor. And from time to time, I would say, David, when are you leaving? When are you leaving? And he, like anyone, I suppose, that's retiring, he struggled with that a little bit, but eventually he gave me notice and we made that public. And just a few days after we made public that David was retiring, I received a letter from Steve Stavely. I've known Steve my entire adult life, local attorney. And he recommended somebody that, in all honesty, in my own mind, I had given some consideration to be our law director, or at least talking to him about it. But I didn't want to steal him from Steve. But when I received the letter from Steve, receiving his blessing to talk to our speaker today, I was thrilled. That was the beginning and the end of the search. I spent some time with Sean O'Donnell and realized he was the right person for the job. Well, it's my pleasure today to introduce to you our guest speaker, Captain Sean O'Donnell. Sean grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. He graduated from Hillsdale College, majoring in classics. While at Hillsdale, he met his wife, Joy, who's here today with their 3 children. You probably hear Peter and Lucy and Caroline in the background, and we're thrilled to have them here. They were married in May 22nd. Happy anniversary again, Joy. May 22nd, 2010, at St. Mary Catholic Church here in Defiance. In July of 2012, Sean was commissioned in the Ohio Army National Guard on the 31st of July, 2012. He serves in the 671st Trial Defense Team, where he defends soldiers facing disciplinary actions. Prior to that, as I mentioned, he worked at Stephen K. Snavely Law Firm from 2013 to 2017. He joined our law department in 2017, and as I said, lives here in Defiance with his wife and 3 children. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Captain Sean O'Donnell. Captain.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for that kind introduction, and my apologies for some of the outbursts you've heard. If it happens again, they know that we are not going to stop for ice cream on the way home. And thank you, Pastor Brobston, for hosting this event that's become such an important ritual for our community. For a place like Defiance, this is an unpredictable and unforeseen way to commemorate Memorial Day. That is an understatement. Absent is the Defiance High School Band of Class, or the majority of them anyway. There are no high school graduation ceremonies to look forward to this week. There is a sea of empty pews in front of me. We are not in our well-kept veterans portion of our cemetery. There is no mulch left at Menards, and you are stuck with me as your Memorial Day speaker. I want you to know that I have not done some of the courageous things that you have observed from prior Memorial Day speakers. Do not put me in the same category as a Commissioner Mack, Benjamin Pierce, or Jim Gillis. Until 1945. They didn't even know if the Allies were going to win. Each day brought news of battles from faraway places, such as North Africa, Midway, and Normandy, that resulted in more widows and more orphans. It is just as easy to look at the men who fought in that war and view them as some kind of superheroes of unmatched courage, and their adversaries as the goofy Nazi villains that you see depicted in the James Bond and Quentin Tarantino movies. Nothing could be further from the truth. Many of the fallen that we honor today, they hadn't even been grown to be men yet. These were not the professional soldiers that you see in today's active army. They were kids, factory kids, farm kids, kids who left their childhood homes to go up against the professional armies of Model, Rommel, and von Manstein. Now, at first, the Americans were green. They were ill-prepared to fight this kind of war. They lacked the mental preparation for the absolute and total destruction that they encountered. The Germans had a two-year head start to smash the French, the British, the Russians, and the Poles. They had developed a swift and decisive killing machine, and they were good at it. You know the story. Through 4 long years of great sacrifice, these 4-H kids as well as young men from across the nation, rose to the challenge. I have to think that the values that they learned on the family farm, hardiness, grit, honor, and a deep abiding faith, helped them persevere through these seemingly insurmountable odds. They were able to overcome their natural fears due to the values instilled in them beyond their mere self-preservation. You might even call it a moral purpose. General Eisenhower recognized this. He called them those inner things. Call them what you will, but I mean those intangibles that are the real treasures free men possess. To preserve his freedom of worship, his equality before the law, his liberty to speak and act as he sees fit, subject only to the provision that he trespass not upon similar rights of others. For these the Londoner will fight, so will a citizen of Abilene. When we consider these things, then the Valley of the Thames draws closer to the farms of Kansas and to the plains of Texas. To my mind, it is clear that when two peoples will face the tragedies of war to defend the same treasured rights, the same spiritual concepts, then in the truest sense of the word, these peoples are truly related. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no coincidence that by VE Day, 7 May 1945, three of our leaders, the new president, Harry Truman, General Eisenhower, and Omar Bradley of the 12th United States Army Group all had roots in the Midwest. Victory came not solely by material advantage and elaborate battle plans, but also by the character traits and a moral purpose that these men, these Midwesterners, shared. You might say, but wait, Captain O'Donnell, doesn't every nation count their warriors among the best and the most virtuous and the most courageous? Don't the winners get to write all the history books? And isn't this just what we Americans tell ourselves to make us feel better after a horribly devastating war? I'm here to tell you that's not the case. In 2016, I had the opportunity to accompany my National Guard unit on a mission in Poland. War had broken out in the Crimea and Donbas regions of Ukraine next door. I was attached to an air defense unit as part of a NATO mission, and we were there to reassure our Eastern European allies that we would come to their aid if they had to invoke Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. An attack on one member nation is an attack on all of us. Around the middle of June, we were preparing to cross northern Poland. As a newly minted captain, I was assigned to be the navigator of the lead Humvee in our convoy. To this day, I am not sure who in the three shop decided it was a good idea to have a Jag steer the convoy through the narrow European streets. Some of them were built in the Middle Ages. I am fairly confident that he is no longer an operations officer. After a few wrong turns, some broken mirrors, and a curious incident of having to turn the convoy around in a construction zone where the road was closed and no one spoke any English, we approached the city of Kozlin along the Baltic Sea. The skyline was like any Eastern European city. It was covered with Stalin-era giant cement block apartment buildings and crumbling post-modern architecture towards the center of town. But right in front of these buildings, at the intersection of what's translated in English as John Paul II Way and the Gdansk Freeway, was a Kentucky Fried Chicken. And by the way, if you know anything about Polish history and the Solidarity labor movement, you know why the names of those streets are important and significant. Upon seeing this KFC, we knew who won the Cold War. It was Colonel Sanders. Around this time, we needed to make a pit stop. We didn't think it very diplomatic to have the 30-vehicle convoy go through the drive-through. So we pulled over next door in a gas station parking lot. We had some of the British in our convoy, so it was a BP to make them happy. As we exited our vehicles, I noticed an old woman approaching us from across the parking lot. She had She had a black shawl. It was like more of a traditional style you would see over there. She had it over her head. And the lines in her face revealed that she had had a hard life and perhaps was in her 80s. She told us, "It's so good to see American soldiers here in my country." And ladies and gentlemen, I will never forget what she said next. Her face darkened, and she said, "I remember when the Russians were here." None of us wanted to ask what she remembered, but we knew what she meant. You almost feel embarrassed after an encounter like this. After all, what did I do to deserve this kind of recognition? After spending a few weeks in the field, eating my MREs, all I wanted was a bucket of chicken. But then I realized she wasn't praising me for anything that I did. She was sharing her appreciation of what other American soldiers before me had achieved, of what they sacrificed so much for, of what that flag meant to her countrymen. The contrast in how this woman viewed American soldiers from those of other nations that passed through her country could not have been more clear. That is the same idea behind the Dutch family's adoption of the graves at the Netherlands American Cemetery in Margraten. The Americans used this town as a staging area for the final assault on Germany. Thomas Connor wrote in his recent book, War and Remembrance, that the local population got to know so many of the American GIs who were there during the final year of World War II and grew close to them. They watched as the American bodies were ferried back across the German border. But they saw us finish the fight. Even today, these local nationals refer to themselves as Americans. Those 8,301 graves, American graves, will never lack for attention. It is why protesters today in Hong Kong carry the American flag, even as they are arrested and manhandled in the streets. The idea that we are meant to freely give ourselves to others, our family, our friends, our country, to stand up for the vulnerable who may never be able to pay us back. We are meant to be more than mere servants whom the state can command into submission. We don't set out to occupy or conquer every nation. Rather, we live out those ideas here at home, at commemorations like this. And as General Eisenhower reminds us, when these ideals are threatened, we fight. People across the world, from the Netherlands to Poland to Hong Kong to Normandy, recognize what a gift that truly is. Perhaps we might call them Americans. There is a tendency at these events to view our soldiers as saints with halos and M4s. And as a judge advocate, I have no rosy misconceptions that our men and women in uniform are perfect. They are not. The ones who gave the ultimate sacrifice in places like Bull Run, Amiens, Dak To, and Ramadi, they were like you and I. They had hopes and dreams. They had their struggles. Some joined our ranks to run from them. Many didn't think their lot in life was fair, and it wasn't. They left behind sweethearts whom they planned to marry and children who they wanted to see grow up. They were scared. The ones who made it home often came back broken on the inside. Today we remember them, we mourn for them, and we take comfort in the promise of the book of Revelation. The Lamb who is in the center of the throne will shepherd them and lead them to the springs of life-giving water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, today belongs to them, but it doesn't end there. This day is more than a token moment of grief followed by a barbecue. Whether you are a young captain trying to navigate your way around the streets in Eastern Europe under the American flag, a parent trying to homeschool your children under these conditions, a high school senior looking back on what should have been, a nurse working double shifts, a daughter grieving for an elderly parent, or a laid-off worker wondering when he can look his family in the eye again. Look to these fallen men and women. Take heart from their sacrifice, because their story is our story, and even from the grave, we know they have something to teach us.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I'd thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and it's time to stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I proudly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
As we prepare for the benediction, Captain O'Donnell, there could have been one thing worse than being a newly minted captain navigating the streets of an Eastern European city. As a former Army chaplain, you and I both know it could have been worse. You could have been a butter bar trying to navigate the streets of Poland and ended up someplace in Portugal, as the way second lieutenants tend to navigate. On this day, and on every day, the promise of God stays with us. And as you go about your day this day, know that God is with you, before you to show you the way, beside you to befriend you, behind you to encourage you, above you to watch over you. But our Lord's promise to each and every one of us in our journey of life and of faith is to always go within our hearts and give us his peace. At this time, we invite you to stand. Prepare to hear gunfire as we will honor those who have gone before us with salute and the playing of taps.
Thank you again, Pastor. I have to believe that being pastor here at St. Paul in itself is a full-time job. But pastor is also the chaplain for all the safety services groups throughout the county. So Defiance City Police, Defiance County Sheriff, all of our firefighters here in Defiance and rescue personnel, and all the volunteer firemen, fire departments across the county, as well as the Hicksville Police Department and their fire department. So two full-time jobs, and thank you very much. Julie Sassine, thank you very much for your work today. Getting this out to everybody means a lot to me and certainly means a lot to our community. Also, I want to thank the Crescent News for publishing articles about what we were trying to do today and making the links available so that everyone knew how to get there. 2 members of our fire department and rescue team are here this morning, just in case, and we appreciate you gentlemen here as well. Tanya Bruner, as always, someone I've really learned to admire from our Defiance County Veterans Office, as well as Mark Newman from DCTV. We appreciate you all very much for being here. In closing, I would like to introduce Mr. Bill Ray. Bill Ray will play for us Amazing Grace. Bill started piping watching the College of Wooster Pipers, where his son attended, and he told me the story before we started this morning that he just asked a question, do you suppose I could learn to do that? And his son hooked him up with an instructor, and he's been piping now for over 20 years. He's a graduate of Defiance College and a retired history teacher and coach at Central Local Schools. I know he's a coach because when I was a football official, he used to yell at me from time to time. He's married and has 1 son. So, Bill, if you would conclude our ceremony with the playing of Amazing Grace, we would be very grateful. Thank you.